Councilmember. Welcome to the February 5th, 2025 Human Services Committee meeting. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Herrick Harris. Councilmember Suffredin.
Here.
Councilmember Revelle.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Harris.
Present.
Right. And then Councilmember Hedekaris could not make it this evening, and so Councilmember Suffredin has been substituted in pursuant to our rules by the mayor. May we have a motion to allow Councilmember Suffredin to participate remotely?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Revelle, seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Harris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
The ayes have it. Councilmember Suffredin may participate remotely. That brings us to the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting from November 4th, 2024. May I have a motion? Moved by Councilmember Revelle,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Harris. Are there any amendments or any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. That brings us to public comment. We have four people signed up in person and 2 people signed up online. We're going to start with, everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. We're going to start with Veronica Reyes. And then we'll have Katanya Robertson.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Reyes. I have lived in Evanston for 25 years and worked at Northwestern University as a cashier worker for 15 years. My husband and son also work in food service at Northwestern University. I am proud to be part of the Northwestern community. I'm proud that through our union, we're winning good wages and benefits so we can support our families and continue to call Evanston home. But the thing I love the most is the Northwestern students. I will never forget how a former student, now a doctor, came back to campus to introduce me to her younger sister who had just started her freshman year. As a food service and hospitality workers, we don't just serve the students, we often become their family, especially for students who may be feeling lonely or sad being away from home. Currently, I work for Compass Group, which has the food service contract for the campus for the last 6 years. When Compass took over in 2018, we have no guarantee that we will be able to keep our jobs. It was very scary and stressful. We have to fight to make sure we wouldn't be fired. Without the job, we wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. I worry we could lose our home. My stomach was in knots for months. I felt terrible that we have to fight just to keep the jobs that we have been doing for many years. I don't want me or my co-workers to go through this again. The Work Retention Ordinance will make sure we continue serving the
15
Northwestern
seconds.
community, no matter who the contractor is. Will be a huge relief for me and my family. Thank you to the City Council members who co-sponsored this ordinance. I hope the Evanston City Council will pass this law soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing. Next is Katanya Robertson, followed by Rosa Villaseñor.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Katanya Robertson. I lived in Evanston, 5th Ward, and have worked at Northwestern University for 8 years. I am a single mother with boys aged 12 and 9. I'm a student myself, traveling to Herzing University in Wisconsin. I currently work for Compass Group at Starbucks on Northwestern campus. I love being on campus with the student because it motivates me to keep going to school. My good union job helps me sustain a stable life for my family because we have affordable benefits and better wages. In 2018, when Compass Group took over, it was a stressful time for me and my coworkers. We were told that we could possibly lose our jobs or would have to start anew as fresh hires. We were scared that even if we were rehired, the pay could go down to minimum wage. It was a roller coaster of emotions for all of us. I'm in a better place now, but I can't go through that again. With school and 2 fast-growing boys, I must keep food on the table and show them to never give up. The Work Retention Ordinance will make sure no matter who Northwestern picks as a contractor, our job would be secure. I can continue the path of being a great mother, a successful student, and a hardworking staff at the Northwestern. The Work Retention Ordinance also helps ensure workers at Northwestern, especially the ones residing in Evanston, maintain their employment. By doing so, it will contribute stability for over 100 workers. The program not only helps individual workers retain their jobs, but also strengthen the Northwestern community as a whole. It ensures stability and promotes a positive environment where employers feel valued as part of the Northwestern family. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rosa Villaseñor and then Dan Abraham.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rosa Villaseñor. Soy residente de Evanston. He trabajado en el Alice Center de la Universidad Northwestern durante 15 años y he criado y sacado adelante a mis hijos ahí.
Good evening. My name is Rosa Villaseñor. I am an Evanston resident. I have worked at the Allen Center at Northwestern University for 15 years, and I've raised my 3 children while working there.
Cuando el empleador cambió a Compass Group en el 2018, fue terrible. En ese momento tenía 2 hijos en casa y 1 en la universidad. Sabía que si perdía mi trabajo no podría pagar el alquiler o ayudar a pagar los gastos universitarios de mi hijo. Con nuestra unión luchamos para asegurarnos de poder mantener nuestros trabajos, pero durante esa transacción hubo muchas noches en las que no podía dormir porque estaba muy estresada y asustada.
When the employer changed to Compass Group in 2018, it was awful. At that time, I had 2 children at home and 1 in college. I knew that if I lost my job, I couldn't pay for the rent or help pay for my child's college expenses. With our union, we fought to make sure we could keep our jobs. But during that transition, there were so many nights I couldn't sleep because I was so stressed and scared.
Estoy orgullosa de ser parte de la Universidad de Northwestern y de servir a los estudiantes, profesores, personal y visitantes de nuestro campus. Soy muy buena en mi trabajo. Me aseguro de que todos se sientan bienvenidos como si vinieran a mi propia casa. Pongo todo mi corazón y mi alma en mi trabajo.
I am proud to be part of the Northwestern community and to serve the students, professors, staff, and visitors to our campus. I am very good at my job, and I make sure everyone feels welcome as if they're coming to my own home. I pour my heart and soul into my work.
Este año ha sido muy difícil porque Alice Center cerró. Hoy, al igual que en el 2018, tengo una hija en la universidad y estoy preocupada porque tengo que pagar sus estudios y más gastos que tengo.
This year has been very difficult because the Allen Center closed, and I'm facing the same uncertainties that I did in 2018 because I still have a child in college, and I need to pay for their studies.
Nuevamente nos enfrentamos a un futuro incierto. Si Northwestern cambia de contratistas, como cuando se abra el edificio que reemplazará a Alice Center, podría echarme a la calle. Eso se siente terrible, me duele el corazón. No importa quién sea el contratista, merezco seguir trabajando en el campus que he llamado mi hogar durante tantos años. La ordenanza ayudará a protegerme a mí y a mis compañeros de trabajo.
If Northwestern changes contractors when the building that is replacing the Allen Center opens, I could be kicked to the curb. That feels terrible and it hurts my heart. No matter who the contractor is, I deserve to continue working at the campus I've called home for so many years.
Gracias por escuchar y espero que podamos contar con su apoyo.
The worker retention ordinance will help protect me and my coworkers. Thank you for listening, and I hope we can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Abraham and then Patrick Griffin.
Good evening. My name is Dan Abraham. I live at 725 Noyes Street in Evanston's First Ward. I'm also organizing director with Unite Here Local 1, the union that represents the subcontracted food service and hospitality workers at Northwestern University. I speak tonight in support of Ordinance 21-0-25, the Worker Retention Ordinance. I moved to Evanston in 2012 in search of a city that reflects my values like community and compassion, fairness. As I've raised my 3 children here, I have mostly found what I was looking for. The opportunity that my family and I have had to be part of a diverse community has enriched our lives. I am proud to live in a city that's big enough to include not only Northwestern University professors and administrators, but also Northwestern University cooks and dishwashers and housekeepers. There aren't too many places like that. Every year it gets harder and harder, less and less affordable for those housekeepers, cooks, and dishwashers to live here. I remember only a couple of years before the pandemic when the university decided to change contractors, and contracted employees asked me, am I getting fired? Am I getting fired? I have the leaflets here if you want to see them. I'll never forget the fear and panic in people's eyes. Those workers organized together and saved their jobs, but only for that day. Today, there is still no guarantee that people who have spent years or decades working at the university will not be gone tomorrow. Not because of some misconduct on their part or university budgetary shortfall, but simply because they lack a simple protection under the law. Today, we ask you to vote yes for that simple protection for these hardworking Evanston residents, and vote yes for the Evanston that we all can be proud of. Let me just say that Patrick Griffin will be available to answer questions during your deliberations on the ordinance and is not going to speak now.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who, did we miss anyone who wants to provide public comment? If not, then Bob, are you coming up to the podium? No, I know. All right, with that, we will close public comment and move on to items for consideration. We have a few items just for folks who are new to this process before we get to the worker retention ordinance. So may I have a motion on item HS2, variation request for ordinance 15023. Moved by Councilmember Ravel.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Harris. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilmember Ravel.
Well, is the homeowner here to talk with
The-
us, or?
No, Chair Reed, council members, Angela Lavernier, Tree Preservation Coordinator in the Public Services Bureau. I did hear from Ms. Pierce. She was planning on coming on Monday, but when it was rescheduled tonight, she had a conflict, so she's not able to make it.
You know, I think it'd be really important to have her here. So I guess I'm going to move that we hold this for another meeting, unless I have
A move to table.
objections for, table.
Second.
Table it to our meeting next month.
It's been moved by Councilmember Ravel and seconded by Councilmember Harris to table this to our March meeting. All those, any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. It has been moved to the March meeting. May I have a motion for item HS3, variation request for ordinance 150?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember
Yes.
Ravel. Any discussion on this item?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Oh, my mic is really loud this evening.
And the other mic is on too.
Huh? I'm surrounded by mics. So I'm not exactly sure. I think this is one of my residents. I got a call last night while driving, and I haven't seen the email. Is this ComEd? Do you know if this?
This is not ComEd, no. This is, I believe it's in Sufferdin's ward. I didn't double check that before I
Yeah, I'm
came.
not sure.
This one is not. Christina Pierce is. This one is on Greenwood, correct?
Is what? I didn't hear him.
Oh, I'm sorry. Christina Pierce, the one on Park Place, is in the 6th ward. I think this other one is on Greenwood. I don't know which ward
Yes,
it is.
it's on Greenwood Street, correct. It's a tree between two houses
Okay.
at 1326.
I was waiting for an email. One of my residents talked about a tree that ComEd is saying is,
I do know that one.
So that's
yes. That is not this one. no.
Okay.
Yep.
okay, thank you. We'll talk about that one
Yes,
later
we
then.
will, yeah.
Okay, that's it, Chair.
Councilmember Ravel.
So, so the concern is about a tree between two houses. Its roots are 6 feet from the homeowner's house and 8 feet from the neighbor's house. So what potential danger is there to the two structures if the tree roots continue to grow?
It's pretty improbable, and the reason I say that is because tree roots, they grow in open space towards available water. And once they hit a structure, they will just move. And, we have such deep basements and crawl spaces in, the Midwest that normally, under normal circumstances, that's a pretty improbable cause for any situation. But it should be, monitored.
Okay. I mean, excuse me, it sounds like kind of an unfortunate tree because it's dropping walnuts for a good month or so, and that's disruptive and dangerous if a person happens to walk by. I mean, I can understand why they want to remove the tree. I guess the real question, since we're still trying to rule on our very first, exception to our tree preservation ordinance, I think it's, I think we have to be clear about how we're interpreting that ordinance. So it says, so the exemption would be if the tree is dead, extremely hazardous, or in dangerous proximity, says to a public utility line, but I would say in dangerous proximity to a house, or is imminently dying, sufficiently hazardous or otherwise unsafe, unhealthy, or insect infested that it constitutes a hazard. So it really doesn't sound like that applies to this particular tree, even though it sounds like an unfortunate tree. I asked my colleagues what they think.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. So I do just, not about this particular tree, but just in general, if we have a tree that we don't deem should come down, but as we know, insurance policies are looking for reasons to drop people. I've had a resident who got dropped because we said they couldn't cut this huge tree. Do we take that into consideration? Do the residents have to bring paperwork? What do we do? Because now we're risking this person's home insurance over a tree that we say we believe isn't a problem. So
Right.
do we have?
So how the protocol works is the city arborist will do a level 1 risk assessment. They can do a level 2, there's 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the max. Level 1 is from the ground, walk 360 around the tree. Level 2 is a basic, but it's a pretty full comprehensive risk assessment where an arborist will give them a report. So they can do that, and if the insurance is always involved, I always suggest getting a level 2 risk assessment because it will give you the full detail of not only the overall tree, but parts of the tree as well.
But I guess my question is, and we see it again, the insurance companies are being a little iffy. They can drop it regardless of what we say. What do we do at that point?
Yes, we have been, and that is a situation that's been happening all over, and I think it's, from what I understand is they do aerials, and if trees are over roofs, and if they're trying to be nitpicky, they could target that house. But in Evanston, we have trees over roofs everywhere. So yes, again, I would suggest if that homeowner gets a letter from their insurance company that they should follow through with a level 2 risk assessment, and that would give them all the information they would need to either go back to, the insurance company or have a discussion or.
But we stand firm. We don't.
Yeah, if the tree is healthy, they could apply for a variation, and we would
Right.
come here and be in this situation.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we verbalize.
Yeah.
Because there's people watching, and again, I've gotten a couple calls where people have actually lost home insurance because of these big, and I go look. When somebody tells me, I'm like, let me see it. It's a big tree, and we just know the insurance companies now are backing out of, for a variety of reasons. Tree just happens to be the one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Suffredin.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. I appreciate that I'm a guest on this committee right now, but are we kind of tracking these discussions? And has there been any thought to the correct interval to assess some of the lessons learned from the way this ordinance is constructed now? Because I think Angela is doing excellent work, but it's also clear that the scope of her evaluation is limited to one part of the equation, but it doesn't address some of the more practical reasons that homeowners may need to address situations like these. And I just want to know, since Councilmember Revelle mentioned we're sort of waiting to set a precedent, has there been any discussion at this committee about when the appropriate time to assess some of the potential improvements that can be made to this ordinance? Like when is appropriate, and we'll have enough data to have that discussion?
I guess I can answer that as interim chair. We've only had one item come before this committee. We have not had those discussions, and I think that certainly is something that this committee needs to take up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, again, just from these two items, that, and again, Angela is doing excellent work on the part of this that is her area, but it's clear that there's potential liability and safety concerns that are part of this that, maybe we need to talk as a committee or ultimately as a council at some appropriate time about the potential unintended consequences of the ordinance that we passed. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Revelle.
So how much does a level 2 assessment cost?
I haven't called around to get estimates. It really depends on what county you're in, and we're in Cook County. I would say between $500 and $800, but again, I have not called around and asked for, level 2 assessment. It is a specialized field. Not every tree care company. It is a qualification that you have to go and pass the test, and it's good for 5 years, and then you have to pass, after 5 years you have to retake the test.
And so what kind of information would a level 2 assessment tell us?
You get a full report on the tree. So every tree will have conditions of concern, and as you read through these, the homeowners are highlighting their conditions of concerns. So the tree care or the tree risk qualified assessor will come in and look at all those conditions of concern and look at the tree and evaluate it and give the homeowner a report point by point. And then at the end, it has mitigation, and it's, if you prune the tree or change the structure or do this or that, it lowers the risk level. The risk levels are low, medium, high. It's very easy to read the report when it's given to the homeowner. And then if the tree is, sometimes the mitigation is to remove the tree. If the condition of concern is too great. And that would be a high risk. So that's what we would, and if it comes back as high risk, I know I said this in the previous meeting, but just to repeat, if it comes back as high risk, the permit is approved.
Sure.
And they do not have to pay the mitigation.
Right, yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like this level 2 risk assessment's going to say it, because it's dropping walnuts, it needs to come down. So that's kind of outside of the scope. Oh dear. Thanks.
And that is why the ordinance was written, is if they wanted to remove the tree, then they pay the fee in lieu, or, plant tree replacements. And that's essentially to pay back the community benefits that are being lost by the removal of the tree.
So, Councilmember Veld, do you have further questions? If not, we do need well, actually, if I may, are you done, Councilmember Veld?
Well, so is this committee a final arbiter on this, or does it go to council, or?
They can appeal to the city manager if they wanted to after this decision.
Yikes.
Okay. I have just two questions. So I do want to make sure that we're not confusing things, because I heard Councilmember Harris, or I want to make sure I'm not confused. I heard Councilmember Harris say that there were a few people in your ward who have lost home insurance coverage, and I think I heard you attribute it to this ordinance because they couldn't take down a tree. I think that just makes me think we've only had one case come before us. And also, they could take down the tree, they'd just pay the mitigation fee. Do we know of situations like that, or I'll let you respond to that, but also for you, I'll ask, do we know of, does the city have documentation of situations like what Councilmember Harris described happening in the community? First, if I can let Councilmember Harris respond.
Well, she can go first. What is the mitigation fee?
It's essentially, it's a calculation.
Right.
So it's based on the size of the tree and the species, and they fall into groupings.
What is the average? My understanding is like $4,000.
Fairly expensive, I think.
Yeah.
It's, for this one, this tree is, let's see, 13.8 dBH, and it's 1725. 1,725 is the mitigation.
Okay.
So
So the resident I talked to last night, again, I was driving, so my attention was more on the road than the person speaking. They're supposed to email me, but he mentioned like $4,000.
Yes, his situation actually has been resolved.
Oh.
Because, so that's probably maybe why he didn't email you.
Okay.
We've been back and forth today.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good.
he had a previous permit that fell before the ordinance went into effect.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah.
But one of the residents I know, there's going to be a couple $1,000s. This tree was huge, and that's why the insurance company was scared that if something goes wrong, it's going to demolish a house because it's a huge tree, and I think it was a couple $1,000 as a senior on a fixed income who just can't do that. And then, of course, if you lose insurance, when you get new insurance, it's higher, so it was just a myriad of things. So I just worry cost, and then you compound that with other things. It just becomes an issue. I believe what you're doing is right and just, but as Councilmember Suffredin said, how do we assess and make sure we're using the right, or going down the right path, not using the right metrics, but how do we fix that if there's somebody who can't afford that? We have people who have come before us saying they're almost out of their homes because of taxes and all of those, and then you put a tree cost on there, and then loss of homeowners insurance, all of that can So, okay, but I'm glad my resident got resolution.
Thank you. And then, so I want to get to updates to the ordinance that I'm hearing, but also I think we need a framework. I think we need more of a framework for how to decide this, and I think it would be appropriate for this committee to adopt that by, oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'll go to go on my first one. So we need a framework, and I think I would like our arborist to bring us a framework that we can adopt by resolution and send to council to adopt by resolution. So there's something in the community and something for future bodies to rely on, because we're not going to have all of us forever. And then outside of that, I think updates to the ordinance, if I heard you correctly, someone can appeal a decision of this body to the city manager. To me, that feels backwards, because we are the elected body. And so I think, if anything, they should appeal the city manager decision to this body. And I think by this body adopting a framework for the city manager to evaluate, these proposals, that I think ensures the wishes of the community are upheld. And then lastly, Evanston is a home rule community. And as we have seen with the California wildfires, the state of California has adopted laws that require insurance companies to provide coverage in certain situations. And so I don't see why Evanston couldn't adopt laws that regulate the insurance industry as it pertains to covering homes that, I guess our ordinance is written in a way that if there is a life or safety issue, that the tree would come down at no cost. Or at least no additional permitting cost. And so with that in mind, if there isn't a life or safety issue, there's no reason that someone should be dropped for their insurance, because we should both be aligned on those things. And so I do think there's an opportunity, if this is happening in the community, to use our home rule authority to update the ordinance to potentially regulate the insurance industry a bit. So with that, is there any response to that? And then I see Councilmember Suffredin has his hand up, and then Councilmember Revelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Angela and Councilmember Harris, if I understand correctly, the situation that you were describing, the resolution there came just because the permit had been applied for before the ordinance took effect. Is that correct?
Well,
So the situation we were just talking about, where you were talking to a resident, and Angela, you said that it had been resolved, but the resolution was just because there had been a permit applied for before this ordinance took effect.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I am a little worried that we might be talking about two different. So the homeowner I was talking about was putting a new line to his house, and he was dealing with ComEd. So that had nothing to do with insurance. Yeah, two separate things, yes. So the ComEd tree removal, that was resolved because it fell under a permit that had been opened before the ordinance came into effect. Yes, yeah, yep, right.
Okay, and my question is, did we get to the point where costs were being considered? Because I think that's like a really good way to, as we evaluate this, look and see what this would cost under the current ordinance relative to what it cost the previous ordinance. But it sounds like that may have not been a tree preservation issue. That was a separate utility trimming issue.
Right, I should probably explain. There are two separate permit reviews that I do. I do these permit reviews if somebody has a hazardous tree and they can apply for a single permit, and we go out and assess the tree to be removed. I also review all the tree preservation permits that go through community development for development. And, and as you know, some of those have been applied before the ordinance in June 1st. So I don't have very many of those still coming through, but I still review some that the application was, before June 1st. So, and those are just mainly tree preservation. What measures can we take to preserve a tree during the development? So it's a completely different permit process.
Okay, great. I was just trying to evaluate if that was potentially a good framework for discussing this, because, you know, as we talk about increasing insurance costs and all the other costs relative to homeowners being compelled to maintain trees that present issues other than health, that just may be a good way for us to kind of understand if there are necessary changes to this ordinance, what they might be. And I'll just leave it there because there's no point in talking about it. But thank you for your response. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We have Ms. We have the law department.
Name change.
Yeah.
Good evening, Chair Reed, Director Ogbo, and members of the Human Services Committee, Catherine Penrose, Assistant City Attorney. I just wanted to point out that the code does have standards for the Human Services Committee for granting variations, and actually they need to be met before it can be granted. I'm not entirely sure that they're the level of specificity that the committee is looking for, but they are there and they do need to be found before the variation can be granted. It's in Title VII, Chapter 8, Section 8.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's roughly what I was quoting from earlier. It says, when a protected tree due to natural causes is dead, extremely hazardous, in dangerous proximity to any public utility lines or related facilities, or is imminently dying, sufficiently hazardous, or otherwise unsafe, unhealthy, or insect infested, such that it constitutes a hazard, you know, then those would be the grounds for an exemption. But I have so when, Councilmember Reed, when you suggest a framework, are you thinking like a point system or something, or?
I didn't have a point system in mind, but just clear guidelines for and I mean, maybe those are clear enough, maybe not.
I don't know.
Maybe those aren't all inclusive.
Yeah, I think we're feeling that they aren't
Yeah,
guidance enough, which is why we're really struggling.
Yeah. Or we just feel bad that we have to say no to these people.
There is that.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Penrose.
I just wanted to point out that the standards for exemption are not the same as the standards that this committee would consider for a variance. And yeah,
So
the
what-
variance
what-
standards do not get that specific. I could run through them if you like. There's 5
Yeah,
of them.
please.
Okay.
And can you cite the chapter as well?
Sure. It is Title VII, Chapter 8. It's Section 810, Variations and Appeals. Variations may be authorized by the Human Services Committee upon making findings that the proposed variation satisfies the following standards. A, the practical difficulty is not self-created. B, the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. C, the requested variation is in keeping with the comprehensive general plan and other adopted plans. D, the requested variation is consistent with the preservation policies set forth in the comprehensive general plan. And E, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified. Following the review of the application materials, the Human Services Committee shall either approve with conditions, or deny the application for variation. And then from then, it would be appealed to the city manager.
Councilmember Ravel.
So, was that section you just read? It doesn't sound like it relates directly to this tree ordinance, tree preservation ordinance. Was it already in place before? I mean, it sounds more like something to do with an actual development of some sort.
It is within Chapter 8, which is related to trees and shrubs. The title was changed with the ordinance from 2023. But I don't believe the rest of the text was altered.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah. Just a point of we may have to go back and check the chain, but quite often when we pass an ordinance, we, at the end of the ordinance, say any, previous ordinance that conflicts with these updates shall, essentially be moot. And I wonder if this is one of those, based on some of the processes set up in the new ordinance. You don't think so? Okay. All right. Anything else, Councilman Ravel? Do I have a motion to, it seems like we're going to deny this, so is there a motion to deny the variation request? Or accept? Or punt this to the next meeting?
So if we deny, then the applicant appeals to the city manager,
They can, yes.
and then the city manager is the end of the line.
Or you can also approve with conditions too, is stated.
Although it would seem, it's either being removed or not removed, it doesn't seem.
Yeah, or the, fee in lieu is part of it. I
Right,
think,
okay.
I guess I was considering that part of the conditions.
Well, it doesn't seem to me that it's urgent to remove the tree, so we could deny the request right now. The applicant could try again next year after we've had, I think this committee needs to develop more guidance for ourselves about how to address these requests. So I guess I move that we deny the request.
Moved by Councilmember Ravel. Seconded by
I guess I'm the only one here to second it.
Councilmember Harris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
If there are 9, don't they have to?
No.
Okay.
All right. That,
And so how do we want to proceed in terms of developing this framework, or is that up to
I guess I
our arborist to?
maybe we make a motion, or staff just heard that conversation and,
Okay,
We could reach back out for more guidance.
yeah.
great, thank you.
Well, then, I would propose maybe we have, this is worthy enough and our time is maybe short enough that we have a discussion on this at our next meeting? And does that give you enough time to come up with something? Okay. I guess I'll use my temporary chair powers to say that that will happen at the next meeting, and hopefully Councilmember Hedekatis will agree. Okay, that brings us to HS4, Resolution 86R24, approval of an honorary street name sign designation. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember Ravel. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. That brings us to item HS5, review of the Evanston Police Complaints and Comments Report. How are you, sir? Is there a motion to accept and place?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember Ravel. Is there any discussion on this item?
No questions.
No questions? If there are no questions, then is there anything that you want to highlight, or?
I don't have anything to highlight, no.
Okay, with that,
Hold on.
go ahead. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I just want to bring attention that you're new to this position, right? Don't you
Yes.
want to say
Yes.
something? Come on now.
Sure. My name is Commander Anthony Correa. I'm in the Office of Professional Standards. I've been with the City of Evanston for about 24 years, in law enforcement about 29 total. So it's my first stint in internal affairs. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry, this was moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember Ravel. All those in favor of accepting and placing the report on file, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? The ayes have it. That brings us to item HS6, Ordinance 21025, amending Title III of the Evanston City Code to add Chapter 35, Workers' Retention Ordinance. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilmember Ravel, seconded by Councilmember
Second.
Suffredin. Is there any discussion on this item? I certainly have
Yeah, I got
discussion.
questions, but go first.
Well, I can't go first, I'm chair. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand, the onus will be, and I don't know who can answer, who can step up to the onus will be on the institution, and so we heard people speaking about Northwestern. I'm overusing Northwestern as examples for anything, but that's an example that was given today. The onus is now on Northwestern if they go with the new. Help me just flesh it out a little more, because I have concerns.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Good evening, Chair Reed, Director Ogbo, members of the committee. I'm Liza Robertson-Young, Chief Legislative Policy Advisor for the city. So as we've heard, the proposed ordinance is intended to provide job security and consistency for workers employed by food service or hospitality contractors at large institutions. And so the problem it's trying to solve is when these large institutions change contractors, the new contractor may not retain the workers employed under the original contract. And as you've heard from the public comment tonight, this places workers at a real increased risk of losing their jobs, which in turn has costs and creates instability for their families, for the local economy and the community. And so the way this would operate, it would address this problem by requiring that the new contractor, so the successor contractor, would retain the previous contractor's existing workforce for a 90-day transition period. And during those 90 days, the successor contractor would pay those workers at least the same wages and fringe benefits they received from the original contractor. And then at the end of the 90-day transition period, the new contractor would offer continued employment to workers if their performance during the transition period was satisfactory. So the onus is on the contractor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I think this is a really important ordinance for us to pass. It provides really important job security to some residents who otherwise are really vulnerable, and I can understand the stress when, you know, they see that a contractor is changing. So, and there are successful examples of this ordinance in place in a number of other communities around the country. I think it's, as I understand it, it's working very well. I think, so I'm fully in support.
Thank you. To support this ordinance, I do have a few questions. Can you discuss who a qualified worker is?
So a worker covered by the ordinance would be a person employed for 15 or more hours per week by a contractor, except people employed in an executive, administrative, or professional capacity. And the businesses that this would apply to would be any on-site preparation, service, and cleanup of food, beverages by a business providing catering or other food services in a hotel, restaurant, cafeteria, educational institution, apartment building, or similar establishment, and then also any on-site housekeeping or janitorial service performed by those same categories of businesses.
Okay.
And it would apply to institutions that use services from contractors that in the aggregate apply at least 200 people in the city. So there would have to be 200 workers for this provision to kick in.
Are we worried that, and I'll ask this to Patrick as well, but both of you, that this would leave out any key groups that, I guess, that would this leave out any key groups? And then I guess for Patrick, does this leave out groups that you all represent?
I think my understanding is that this is the group of workers that are most at risk of economic displacement when a contract changes, but I will allow Patrick to speak to that.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. I can't think of any groups that this would leave out. It is 200 is a pretty high number, but I don't think of any groups of workers that we represent that this would leave out.
Okay. And then how does this apply to a franchise? So I don't think Starbucks is Starbucks a franchise based?
I think sometimes it is. But in general, I think the ordinance applies to people that, or to institutions that employ 200 positions in Evanston. So I think that if you take, for example, like you said, Starbucks, that would be 200 Starbucks employees in one institution, which I don't think that there probably are. That answers your question.
So then with those, I'm sorry, just to make sure I have a clear understanding, and maybe for Liza again, so the folks who work at Starbucks at Northwestern now, is Northwestern covered or is the Starbucks covered?
So the people that work at Starbucks at Northwestern, they all are employed by Compass Group. So Compass Group kind of uses the branding of Starbucks or other small businesses, but they're all employed by Compass Group.
Okay. And then for Liza, what other, we're saying Northwestern, folks who work at Northwestern are here, but who else does this ordinance apply to?
That's a great question. My understanding is that right now Northwestern is the primary institution that this would apply to, just because 200 employees is a very high threshold. Hospitals are not covered under the ordinance. I believe the intent is that the school districts also would not be covered. So any new institution that came in and met that 200 threshold would be covered.
Okay. And to be clear, you said the intent is that the school districts would not be covered. Are they, or are they not?
They are not. It does apply to educational institutions, but because the school districts, my understanding is that they employ their food service workers directly. The food service workers aren't covered by a secondary contractor, so they would not fall under this ordinance.
Okay. Are there other, and I'm sorry, did I hear you also say that this only applies to educational institutions, or?
No, it applies to the businesses that I listed before, which would be food services and janitorial services in a hotel, restaurant, cafeteria, educational institution, apartment building, or similar establishment.
What are we leaving out? Just, I know that we're where this ordinance came from, but I'm just trying to think in a broader sense.
If there are other categories of workers that the committee would like us to look at, we would appreciate that guidance.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to understand, I have one more question, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Revelle. I'm curious about protections against retaliation in this ordinance. Or really, I guess I'm curious, what is the mechanism for ensuring that this ordinance is enforced?
Yeah, so the ordinance charges the Health and Human Services Department with enforcement, and they would administer and enforce this section. They're authorized to adopt rules to effectuate that administration, and this would be in accordance with our existing administrative adjudication procedures that we already have in place. There's a fee penalty structure that the city would impose, and then also workers or their collective bargaining representative can file a private cause of action in circuit court.
Thank you. Councilmember Revelle.
Excuse me. I thought one thing that you said was really helpful. For example, that our school districts would not be covered because they hire these workers directly, and so that would be the same, I assume, for any of our other bigger employees in town. They don't have a group like Compass kind of in charge of the employees for that work. So I think that helps really narrow the application of the ordinance.
Yeah, the goal really is to protect workers who are at risk of a contract changing and then not being maintained.
Okay. Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this forward to our next council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. And with that, there is no further business before us.
Thank you.
And that concludes the February 5th meeting of the Human Services Committee.